Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. This is Success with Srini.
Happy Monday morning to you. Welcome back to Success with Srini. Today on the podcast, we are talking about how to have more control, how to position ourselves to be in control of life. And yesterday, I was here talking about how to have more balance, how to create more balance in life. And it made sense to talk about control today so that these two episodes are back to back. Yesterday, I made a case that there are 3 things that you have to do to create more balance. And I'm talking about control today because when you lose balance, there is a pressure on control. Now you are under pressure to control whatever balance you lost, and you'll do whatever it takes to recreate that balance. So the way to preempt from anything happening to balance, it makes sense to be in control. Some time ago, I made a point on one of the podcast episodes that the only time you are in control is when you realize that you are not in control. And even though it's an oxymoron, like you are in control when you're not in control, well, that's the humor part. But then the truth is this: when was the last time you felt that you were in control of something only to realize that you are not in control? In my 20s, in my 30s, I was, I'll control everything. But now, with a receding hairline, almost bald head, I think I lived enough to realize that, after all, I'm not in control. And as we mature, as we go along with life, we realize that we are not in control. And things happen for a reason, and whatever that reason is, who knows what it is. But, some things are in a certain way, it's destiny, you can say. I don't want to say that. I would rather say I'm of the firm belief that we design. But there are certain things that we cannot control, and that's the truth. But there are certain things we can, and certain things we cannot. We can control our thoughts, we can control our feelings, we can control our movements, we can control our activities, we can control our time, and all that, despite of interferences, despite of others encroaching or stepping in. And I talked about boundaries yesterday. We can control certain things, and there are things that we cannot control. So let's understand what are the things we can control and how to bring in more control. And I'm going to give you a formula. See, if you bring in a little bit more discipline into anything you are doing, you are now in control of your life. Little bit discipline. You kind of wake up early in the morning, you have a routine that you work, you have an early morning, mid-morning, early afternoon, late afternoon, whatever your routines are, just a little bit of discipline, you have more control on life. Little bit of activity. Like maybe you meditate a bit more, maybe you do yoga more, or whatever activity, little bit of more activity brings in a little bit of more control on your mind. A little bit of more feelings brings in, or a bit effort on existing feelings brings in more control on relationships. A little bit of fuel brings in better health or control on health. You see, there are things that, if done, create more control. And anybody can do it. And there are a lot of, as I say all the time here on this podcast, a lot of literature available, a lot of content available on how these things have to be done precisely. But you get the point. That little bit of more brings in control. But for some reason, people choose not to do it. And sometimes I meet people who tell me, I've done a lot in life. How come life is not rewarding me? When somebody says like that, or somebody asks a question like that, I've done a lot, I'm doing a lot, how come life is not rewarding me? Then in that moment, I know they lost control. See, if I ask a question that this podcast is going to be there on YouTube. There is a high possibility you are listening to this on YouTube or you're watching this. You're not seeing me, but at least you're listening to this. There is a B-roll that's playing and my voice is playing in the background. There is a high possibility at the time you are listening to this podcast on YouTube, there might be 2 or 3 views, or maybe 5 views. If I look at my views of my podcast and I measure myself with the views, guess what will happen to me tomorrow? And you go back and look at all the other podcast episodes on YouTube, there might be 4 or 5, maybe 6 views on each of the episodes. I know that because I've seen that. And if I take that as a measure, guess what happens to my mindset? I'm like, if nobody's watching this video on YouTube, why should I post on YouTube? If everybody's listening to this on my podcast app, which by the way people are, but not really watching this on YouTube, then my mindset, I'm compromising my state at that point in time. I'm like, why should I even produce and render this, create a video, render the video, upload the video, tag it, all that, write a heading, write a description, all that takes time and effort. Why should I do this? Well, and my mind is like, okay, if I'm doing all this, there's no response, why should I do this? That's me effectively at that point in time losing control. So I've never allowed this thought to come in, that I don't want to find data points so that I have a proper excuse to walk away from doing what is necessary. What if that one listener who happens to be you, now watching this on YouTube, still this makes sense to you? And if I don't do this, then maybe I really missed out on helping someone. I'm not saying I'm directly helping, but at least it contributed to your thinking. Some way I did my little bit. I'm not saying that just because of me you are getting anything, a massive result. That's not the point. The point is at least it sets you to discover more. Maybe somebody else will help you. So I meet people who ask these questions and I'm like, wow, okay, so you understand that you're losing control. And these thoughts, they pull you away from what is necessary, what is your thing, your game that you have to play, your role that you have to play. You are being taken away from it. And the more you ask these kind of questions, the more you get distanced from what is otherwise the thing that you have to do. So here is what we know. If you want to create better control, this is the secret part. If you are looking for the ultimate secret on how to have more control on life, it starts with you by giving. You give if you want to have more control. If you are perceived as a giver, or you are recognized as a giver, or you are tagged in people's mind as a giver, your life is going to become better. For some odd reason, and I've seen this happen, people who give are the people who are the most happiest. And things seem to happen to them. It's amazing. So it starts with you being a giver. Then you give. And then you share. There's a difference between giving and sharing. Sharing is whatever is a part that you think is yours, you give a small part of it to somebody who also deserves it or who also needs it. That's what's called sharing. But in giving is something where you give it away. You no more have it with you. You give it away. So giving creates control. Sharing creates control. Now, let's say you can't give, you cannot share. Then comes something else, which is caring. You care. That creates more control. It makes people around you to trust you, believe you, all that. So there is magic that happens as a part of caring. And there is one more thing, which is much more bigger than this, which is you live somebody's life. That's even bigger. Okay? So you care for someone, you give something to someone, you share something with someone, and above all, let's say none of that, but you choose to live somebody else's life. That's even the highest level. All this creates control. And this plays out in our life in different shapes and forms. I've seen parents who live their lives literally. The children, they don't do anything. They are working hard. I know somebody, this lady who completely took charge of the life because her 2 sons and 2 daughters, they do nothing. But she has gone out to really create an economy for them, literally working and making money for them, literally living the lives of each one of her kids so that the kids are grown up and all, but so that they can have a comfortable life. Seen that? I've seen people give away everything. I've seen people share everything. I've also seen people who are not in a situation to give or share, but then truly care for others. Now, let's pause for a second and go through this for, which of these 4 things you think is the most impactful? Which is the least impactful? Okay, when you give, you have some impact. When you share, you have a lot of impact. When you care, you have the ultimate impact. Caring doesn't involve anything. It's just that it's sharing your emotions. That means you are thinking about somebody in your thoughts. Magically, this element, caring part, is ultimate. The least is when you live somebody's life. So forget about some impact or a lot of impact. Let's talk about least impact and ultimate impact. Ultimate impact happens when you care for someone. And least impact happens when you try to live somebody else's life. So the mother who is working for 4 kids, they don't value her work. Your friend, your relative will value if you sit down and have an emotional conversation within which you tell them that you care for them. That has value. They will value you. But here, the 4 kids, grown up, should be working, should be bringing in money, should be leading their life. They depend on the mother. They don't care for the mother. These are interesting dynamics of life, and I happen to be in a position where I work with people. I get to see these things. I get to hear these things. And wow. And today's podcast, in fact, is motivated by this specific event where I'm seeing this mother working so hard for 4 kids. I said, wow, how can this mother create more control of her life? Or how does she get control of her life? That's how this whole podcast episode happened. That's the secret. The secret is that you give, share, and care. Do any one of those, you'll be golden. That's all for now. Hopefully today's podcast episode is going to motivate you, inspire you in some level, at some level. If it does, then do me a favor, write a comment, rate the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, then there should be a place for you to write a comment and like and subscribe to the channel. That's all for now. You go ahead and have a wonderful start for your Monday, and I will catch up with you tomorrow, hopefully with another event in my life, something that I witnessed, something that I experienced, or maybe a question coming from you. We'll see what tomorrow has in store. That's all for now. You take care of yourself. Bye.